And so it's such a pleasure for me to welcome the founding academic director of the Allan Center for Africa Entrepreneurship at Stellenbosch University. Dr. Phumlani Nkontwana is a development economist. He's a researcher, entrepreneur, and involved in the science and practice of entrepreneurship-led sustainable development in Africa. As we invite Dr. Nkontwana, again, let me invite you to please send me your questions. Time permitting, we're going to try and put some questions to our keynote speaker before we transition to the panel. And as always, let's give a resounding round of applause to our keynote speaker as they come up. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Sorry, I'm not wearing a suit. I decided, before I went to breakfast at the hotel, I wore a suit. And then I was like, why? Why should I do that to myself? So after breakfast, I went back to my hotel room and I changed. So I wanted to feel comfortable. My name is Phumlani, and all the way from Stellenbosch. And I'm very happy to be here to contribute to Stephen's and ABSA's bid for using entrepreneurship as a vector for social change and inclusion. And I've been doing this for 15 years. And 15 years ago, when I started being involved in the field, I was concerned about why there was no data to help us progress entrepreneurship in Africa. Why is it that there's 643 support organizations in Africa, and yet there's so much duplication and fragmentation? And how can we use our data skills to stand on the giant shoulders of experimentations and see through things that we can't see? So a few years ago, I convinced the CEO of Allan and Jill Gray Philanthropy to invest in a think tank. At the time, we didn't know what it would look and feel like. And then 5 years later, that think tank happened. And it's now at Stellenbosch University as the Allan Gray Center for African Entrepreneurship. So we see it as a data hub of hubs, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so there's a few things, but since we are fairly new, just a year old, in this Stellenbosch University outfit, I wanted to cover a few things, but I'll focus a little bit more on the data hub of hubs and use an example of some of the ecosystem data work that we've done. So I think I've mentioned this a little bit, but the idea was to set up a center that will really inspire data decisions in Africa. And our vision is to create knowledge, but we want to do that through data-driven dialogues, which is why I'm here. And we hope that we can employ an ecosystem approach to this work. In other words, we don't want to just be isolated and be siloed. We want to inspire data-driven dialogues, and we do that in a couple of countries already. So I'm alone here, but I promise you there's a bigger team, and this is just a core team. One of the tools I'll talk about today has a different team. So we have about 5 research teams, and each research team has a different research team. But this is, if you like, the core team. And we're fairly pan-African as well. So there's people from Kenya here, Rwanda. We're also fairly global. There's people from Netherlands, and there's people from France, like Dimitrius, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to skip the values, but I do want to emphasize that our goal is to take long-term approach to entrepreneurship, hence the idea of data. And I've been collecting data for entrepreneurs and ecosystem players for the last 5 years. And there's a huge difference already, even in just that effort. But the idea is to take a long-term approach and make sure we're good at that, and we can do that really well, and hopefully contribute to social change. So I'm going to skip this as well, but this is quite interesting for us. So we spent the last 2 years thinking about how might we contribute to social change. And for us, the center's role is really at the diagnosis level. So I'm going to talk about 4 diagnoses that we've done and some of the diagnostic tools that we've created. But effectively, the idea is to step outside experimentation. So the first 10 years of my life as a professional, I was involved directly in setting up hubs, incubators, accelerators, talent investors, venture studios, and all these things. And then I realized I didn't make a difference, even after 10 years. I just didn't see what I was doing. And at the very least, I could see a lot of failures. So I was challenged, and in the last 5 years, I've started to step more outside. In other words, to help diagnose so that we can better experiment. And then if we experiment better, we can do talent well, and we can do culture well, and support very well. So some of you might know, last year we launched Motor Collective, which is an ecosystem movement that you can check out on LinkedIn. And we launched it in Cape Town, and we had about 600 or so people that came. So we basically have 5 thematic research areas: talent, support, funding, policy, and ecosystem metrics. Bulk of what I'm going to talk about today is only on ecosystem metrics, which is the diagnosis part. But we do take deep dives on issues of talent, support. For example, this morning I submitted to a journal a paper just looking at talent in townships in South Africa. And so we take deep dives in some areas. By the way, these 4 areas are not just thumb-sucked. So I was involved in what is called Oxford Expert Panel on Entrepreneurship. And a few of us, 30 or 40, validated that Africa is still struggling with these 4 areas. Virtually, if you pick any paper or talk to anyone who knows entrepreneurship, they'll cite one of these 4 issues as the wicked problems. And that's why this center is trying to contribute in unpacking that a little bit more. So these are the 4 ecosystem building projects that we currently have. So we have what is called Rwanda Recalibration Project, where we're working with the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, and we've helped them map out, diagnose, and basically start measuring their ecosystem. We just finished a baseline on their work. And when we have here in South Africa what we call Connect 10, which is effectively a sister project to the Rwanda Recalibration, we basically measure 10 conditions that can enable productive entrepreneurship in this country. And we've started going around KZN and then Western Cape, basically gathering provincial governments. You know, if you look at your IDPs, which is a roadmap that municipalities use, it's completely detached from entrepreneurship. So we are saying, how do we use an entrepreneurial ecosystem framework? And we've put together a paper where we've mapped that against IDPs in KZN and Western Cape. So really bringing entrepreneurship at the heart of these integrated development plans. And then we launched just a month ago at the Global Entrepreneurship Network's GEC Plus, which took place in Cape Town ICC. And we launched the first ever Africa Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Index, which I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. This profiles 29 African countries against core ecosystem conditions. This has never been done before. And we are saying if we cannot even understand at that macroeconomic level, how do we intervene? And then we have what is called ecosystem.build. If you take a moment now and go to your phone and type africa.ecosystem.build, you will find a website where we've put the work that we've done on the index there. So we'll update that website all the time. For example, we only released a technical note and a methodology note last week, and you can now find it in the website. And we also released the data on the 29 countries on the website. So africa.ecosystem.build. So, and then the last bit, which is why I'm here, we want to become a data hub of hubs. In other words, we want to become a resource for everyone in this room and virtually, and be able to provide ecosystem services using data. So I'm going to skip all the other bits and focus straight on the ecosystem building efforts that we've done. So this is a Rwanda recalibration, which I've explained, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So we've profiled, we finished the report 2 weeks ago, 119 ventures in Rwanda. Now this might sound like very small, but in Rwanda we estimate there's about 1,000 active ventures. Okay, and this is the largest data set that they have, which is more than 10%. And 28 ESOs, which is enterprise support organizations, incubators, accelerators, etc. And this might look very small, but in Rwanda there's about plus minus 50 ESOs. So this is more than 50% of the ESOs in Rwanda that have been profiled. So this is a workshop. This is a practical workshop. We don't just sit and research, where we're in KZN and we're working and workshopping the KZN government on the 10 conditions and how they might adopt that as part of their IDPs. And we will launch the website on Connect 10 very, very, very shortly, which is how do you connect the 10 conditions and make them work? And that's why we're calling it Connect 10. And then I explained a little bit about this, but you already have a website, so I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. Just suffices to say that this is live now, and we've baselined 29 countries. We didn't do 54 because we couldn't get data on the others, and that's the problem with data in entrepreneurship. So some people on LinkedIn were criticizing us, but this is half the continent, sure. But if you have data, we will integrate the countries. So, and we've been looking at this for a year, and we just don't have the data on other countries. We don't know where to get it. So I want to talk a little bit about the tools that we've developed. So we've developed 4 tools to date, which are ready, basically we're ready to commercialize them, and we're ready to engage people with, including Stephen. I spent the whole afternoon with Stephen and his team and Nkontwana on Friday, basically workshopping these tools, looking at what can these tools do for the bank. So here, basically, ultimately, so I'm going to do this. I'm supposed to do this the backward, but let me do it this way. So in my view, you need to understand the ecosystem, which is a macroeconomic level view. You are only as strong as the strength of your ecosystem. Okay, you're only as strong as the strength of your ecosystem. So if you find that your ecosystem is struggling, no matter how many support organizations you're going to put together, they're just not going to work. And that's the story of Africa. But when you've set up and you've fixed those ecosystem conditions at macroeconomic level, you're only as strong as your support organizations, hence the ESO diagnostic tool. And if you do that well, you will see venture progression. So I sent Stephen a white paper we put together where we're looking at how venture progression works in Africa. So how do you get people from ideation to MVP to seed to early growth to maturity, the whole journey? So that's why we've launched a venture diagnostic tool. So you can complete that tool and it'll check out exactly where you are in your journey, which is quite powerful. But ultimately as well, as you guys all know, it also comes down to the jockey. So the talent itself. There's literally no science around how to identify entrepreneurs. It's hard. Like, I follow, study venture studios, your Antlers, you name them. There's literally no one silver bullet for understanding how do you select people, particularly at high school level, at primary level, even at university level. So we've put together a tool that profiles 13 entrepreneurial competencies. You can go as many as 54 attributes or competencies or whatever you want to call them that people associate with entrepreneurs, but we've distilled them to 13 that we feel are the most piercing. And we have a tool now that we've used in Kenya, Rwanda, and recently in South Africa. So I was meant to just have a meeting for an hour with Stephen on Friday. It ended up being 4 hours, if not 5, because he was very interested in this, and I showed him a paper we just did now profiling high school learners in South Africa, 769 of them using this tool. And then, of course, I'm going to skip this because I wanted to do it the other way around, from macro to institutional to venture to individuals. So now let me actually show the results, because it might sound all theoretical and all of that. So this is an example of what we've done in Rwanda. I've anonymized this. So basically, this is an example of what our venture diagnostic tool, the type of data that you can get. It profiles a bunch of things. As I said, we've just done 119 ventures in Rwanda, and this is their biodemographic data. It tells you how many ventures, how many genders, education levels, where their backgrounds are from. It tells you the age that these founders, and more importantly, where they plan to expand, which might look very basic, but in Africa is a lot of geopolitics as well. This is quite powerful for the Rwandan government to look at and say, we need to fix our stuff with certain countries because our entrepreneurs want to go there. They wouldn't know this without data. And this is some of their impact data. Basically, they've created these ventures, 592 jobs, and you could slice and dice this by gender, etc. And then the diagnostic tool takes 4 years. I mean, it's probably one of the most demanding tools. So as a researcher, I know that a moment a tool or a survey is more than 5 minutes or somewhere to 10, then I know people don't complete it. And this will require 40 to an hour to complete. That's because it's got a lot of deep information. So we take 4 years back, like you can see here, this is from 2020 to 2023, and you could see the trend. You could see the trend in terms of jobs, you could see the trend in terms of revenues that they've created, and you could see the mix of funding. Obviously, you want ventures to get more investments than grants, but currently you can see that's almost a match of the money that Rwandan firms are using. And of course, we want them to employ younger people, so you can get that. And we want, obviously, full-time jobs, but currently only 27% are full-time jobs, which is hard. I'm involved in another incubator and accelerator in Rwanda, and in East Africa, we also do 25% full-time jobs. So like I said, you're only as strong as your ecosystem. So the venture, the ESO I'm involved in is very well-resourced and uses a lot of data. But if Rwandan firms in general achieve 27% employment, we are likely to achieve the same. So, because there are ecosystem barriers in that country. And of course, this is the key thing that is the value proposition of this venture diagnostic tool. It's essentially this. So we've coded it such that it checks out where you are in your journey, which is the whole point. Now, this is extremely important, and I was trying to explain this to Stephen. So if your ecosystem strategies are different, okay? If you go to the US, people are trying to create unicorns, high-tech firms that will globalize. If you go to other contexts, people are trying to create jobs. If you go to other contexts, ecosystem strategies are trying to create social change, et cetera, okay? So you need to name that ecosystem strategy. If your ecosystem strategy is to create jobs, then of course you want a lot of firms to be not only at early growth, but growing, maturity, et cetera. And this is obviously quite concerning, but it's quite powerful because it shows you that bulk of them are stuck at product development, which is at MVP level. Now, if you juxtapose this with the ESO diagnostic tool, this is a venture tool, you will notice that the context of that country is such that there's literally 2 fab labs or maker spaces. So if you don't have maker spaces that help you with product development, then you can't develop products. Hence, a bulk of them are stuck at MVP stage. So this is quite powerful. Now you can say as a Ministry of ICT and Innovation, this is great. Let's get more ESOs to go and solve that problem. Okay, this is interesting. It also means you are efficient about how you match not only founders with ESOs, but how you also match founders with funding. So everyone knocks at VC's doors and they spend a lot of time and waste VC executive time. Basically, this suggests that only one firm is worthy having a VC conversation that is at early growth, which is basically in our coding, it's a firm that has grown for 3 years at 20% growth rates. By the way, all these tools are globally benchmarked, and we use validated scales. Okay. I'm going to skip some of this. This is the ESO diagnostic tool. So what I was trying to say earlier is you can see at the bottom, those are number of fab labs or maker spaces that the ESO diagnostic tool. So you don't have maker spaces, so entrepreneurs don't know how to create products, and that's why they're stuck at MVP. Simple math. Okay. And you can see a lot of services that are provided in that context are training and workshops. We all know trainings don't create entrepreneurs. Okay, training paradigm doesn't work. Anyways, I'm going to skip this. You get the point of how you can use these tools as a collective. These are some of the things that were interesting. When I did my PhD, I studied 7 countries, 7 African countries. And my supervisor said that was a little bit too big, so I needed to focus on 3 countries. So I studied Rwanda, Kenya, and Ghana. And the average, and this was 2021 or so, 2020, 2021, the average number of years an ESO had, based on my research, was 5 years. This is obviously in Rwanda, but in the continent, the average was 7. This hasn't changed, which means ESOs in Africa are very young. They are startups themselves. And that's why we need to diagnose them, and that's why we need to look at their capacities and see how we can help them. And this was very concerning to me, looking at the frequency of how they engage with the ecosystem. So a lot of them ad hocly, so they don't come like this and collaborate and partner. And we know here in South Africa as well, people show up like this, take pictures, but they actually just don't collaborate. And we also know that no one has ever created entrepreneurs using a micro model. So all those who are successful, they are catalytic. So they partner with other people. Okay. So how often does your organization review its strategies? You can see a bulk of them very ad hoc, so which means that the services are off the shelf. And this is basically at the bottom, the countries that the ESO supports. So a lot of them are Pan-African. This is Connect 10. And then lastly, I think I'm going to talk about what is trending at the moment in our work, which is this Africa ecosystem diagnosis. And this is the diagnosis of 29 countries. And basically we profile them and we look at the top 4. And you could look at the top 4. This has been extremely controversial, because if you pick any paper, they'll tell you Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt, which is what we call now the innovation quadruple. But we are saying you are measuring the wrong things, because you are measuring the outcomes. You're not measuring capacity. So we're interested in propensity of countries to create entrepreneurs. Now, you don't have to do the math here or know the math. Just look at the colors. Green is good, orange is okay-ish, red is bad. And what this tells you is that Africa has pathologies. So we're looking at a paper now, we're looking at ecosystem pathologies. Basically, the whole thing of localized or national ecosystem strategies won't work for Africa. Africa needs to effectively employ what I call translocal ecosystem strategies, because you've got similar problems. And these are across 7 ecosystem areas, which is governance, culture, support finance, infrastructure, market access, and human capital. And these are the countries and the top 4, as you can see. Okay, I think that's about it. Just on time, I think.
Thank you very much. I think you've been excellent on time. I'm going to ask you to take a seat for me, Phumlani, just for one question. You can sit close to me. I've been seeing everybody running away. You can sit right here. There's just a question that Tamiko shared, which I think was such an important question. And Tamiko says, who are these diagnostic tools for? And how are they being used? And where do you see the biggest gaps in the space? And maybe let's focus on the first part of the question, because I think it's an important one. In whose hands are we hoping these tools will land?
Yeah, so it's 4 ecosystem tools. So I feel like anyone who's funding entrepreneurship, so basically philanthropies, banks, development organizations like your GIZ, DOTS, IDRCs, basically anyone who funds entrepreneurship. I think it's only responsible that you understand the context that you are funding entrepreneurship in. And I think it's only responsible. So one of the other prospective clients invest in 9 ESOs, okay? They have no clue what's happening in those ESOs. They don't understand their capacities. They don't even, even ESOs in Africa don't understand themselves what the difference is between incubation and acceleration.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, and then if you are an ESO, it's in your best interest to profile the talent that you are dealing with.
So if you're going to put your money into entrepreneurship, it makes sense to access the data that helps you channel that money effectively. Final question, again, another one from Jacques. I wonder if we can get Jacques a prize for all of these amazing questions that he is feeding me here on stage. And I'm not sure if Jacques is in the room or online. But Jacques is saying, Phumlani, we're sitting with an almost 50% unemployment rate amongst young people. In your view, how do we get at least 25% to start their own businesses? Because you spoke about 13 characteristics, you spoke about, but how do we get young people actively engaged in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think we need to go back to high schools. It's interesting, okay. So Europe has been doing high school and primary entrepreneurship education for 20, 25 years. We do it badly in this country, badly. I know I see Martin, who's one of the people that does, I'm sure you all know Martin, but I can name them. I can name organizations that are involved in the high school space. By the time people get to varsity, it's too late. Their families already are putting pressure for them to get a job. Okay, so I think the game changer for me, So when I did my master's, I asked that question, where's the right time to start? Is it primary? Is it high school? Is it varsity? And I'm settling on high schools. I feel like primary we don't have time. We're a ticking bomb, not just in South Africa. So we need to create jobs like ASAP. So I think high school is good enough to get people to pick up skills they're going to need to create ventures, not pick up skills for jobs.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Phumlani a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Phumlani.
Thank you.
And as Phumlani descends the stage, I'm going to transition us now and build on a lot of what Phumlani said as we go into our panel that looks at how do we enable inclusive and sustainable entrepreneurship. Phumlani, I'm personally really positively challenged by some of what you've shared with us. As a person who moderates events and conversations all around the world, one of the things that are constantly lamented is the absence of data coming out of Africa. And to hear that there are people doing the work of collating the data, sense-making the data, and then making it accessible to all of us is really encouraging. And so for this panel, to really speak to how then do we leverage data and other tools to create an enabling, inclusive and sustainable entrepreneurship. I'm going to invite Dr. Stephen Zwane back onto stage. Let's give Dr. Zwane a round of applause again. And then I'm going to invite Associate Professor